Hello, everyone, and welcome to a conversation about how artificial intelligence is advancing into new frontiers that are improving our world in very intuitive and material ways. This new wave of AI applications that's taking center stage is helping both private and public sector organizations innovate by using more sources of information from digital and physical assets, and in the case of generative AI, even producing more of that content. To fully realize the opportunity that today's advanced AI promises, we believe that organizations need to balance the reward against the risk by adopting a unified asset strategy. I'm Deborah Slapok, and I'm responsible for innovation strategic initiatives, including research, recommendations, and thought leadership for emerging technologies, such as those we'll be talking about today. And I'm joined by Rob Gerbrandt and Tom Motzel, two of my favorite colleagues. Rob is the global head of Information Governance Advisory at Iron Mountain, where he's responsible for developing strategic relationships as well as consulting capabilities and practices across the 5 global regions. And experienced information management consultant, Rob is also a member of the board of directors of the Association of Intelligent Information Management. Tom is a pioneer and an innovator with an extensive record of applying deep domain expertise in both technology and data management. As a result of his contributions over 14 years as a strategy consultant within the enterprise content management industry, Tom has been inducted into the Association of Intelligent Information Management Company of Fellows. Today, he serves as a value architect at Iron Mountain, where he helps to align customer needs, solution portfolios, and sales enablement programs. I'm really excited to have both of you with me today, gentlemen. We recently sponsored a global study with 500 decision makers, and 98% said that AI is essential to innovation. I think that's the biggest number I've seen so far in the industry. Now, the most common output of traditional AI and analytics use cases falls into several categories. I've listed them here on the slide: data analysis, reporting, decision support, even workflow automation. The models used for these outputs rely mostly on structured data, such as numeric data like temperatures or sales figures, or interval data like fluctuating stock market prices, levels of energy consumption, as well as transactional data, which are things like sales, banking, credit card, or supply chain transactions. Most of you are probably quite familiar with these. The regularity of this data, the structured data, simplifies programming software so that it can perform specific actions based on precise data inputs and streamline processes or enhance efficiency in a lot of different use cases. Now, the interesting thing to me is that, as you can see from the IDC quote, in 2022, this was actually a bit surprising, structured data, including master and transactional data, remained the primary data used in AI applications. So, for example, relative to what is master data, it might include data about products, like product IDs, names, descriptions, or customers or suppliers, such as their IDs or names or contact details. That's pretty stable data. It doesn't change very often. Whereas transactional data typically records, who, what, when, where, and how a transaction took place. So that really dominates how AI is being used today. Now, we are seeing advances in AI capabilities and supporting technologies, things like computer vision, sensors associated with the Internet of Things, haptic devices, augmented and virtual reality, these kinds of things. AI is stepping literally off those screens where we're used to seeing it at work and into our lives. And on the one hand, it's doing like the hardest and most repetitive jobs. And on the other hand, the most engaging and life-sustaining jobs. And we're seeing this advanced AI take off in manufacturing, security, retail, data center management, transportation, of course, smart cars. Now, while these applications continue to use structured data, they also rely on unstructured data, which means things like text, images, video, and audio. And that's where we're getting this new value. Let's take a really simple example that everyone can easily relate to, which is crop yields. We all eat. Structured data like weather conditions or soil composition or historical yield figures, these are used for systematic analysis and prediction. Things like satellite imagery, drone footage, even farmers' notes, these are unstructured data. And they provide detailed insights into whether the crops are healthy and what their growth patterns are. Literally, photographs can be compared to see how plants are doing under different conditions to determine whether optimum growth is being achieved. AI algorithms analyze this information and then they identify issues like pest infestations or nutrient deficiencies so that they can make data-driven decisions. We believe as AI and supporting capabilities advance that industry leaders will be those who capitalize on the value of unstructured data, including data that is currently stored in physical form, like paper, analog tapes, that sort of thing, along with structured data as these AI capabilities advance. Now, the urgency to move forward with a strategy that encompasses digital and physical assets is pretty evident in the eruption of generative AI and the disruption that it's causing across a whole swath of industries. It's also impacting the work of regulatory bodies, the job market, and so on. The use of generative AI alone is expected to add 40% in revenue to the market over the next several years. And, we don't know what could be next. But what we do know is that a significant shift is here and that we need to prepare assets to be ready for it. So let's have a look at what the research is telling us about the top emerging technologies and the critical nature of AI and innovation. You can see here 3 key projected growth areas in which unstructured data combines with structured data to have incredible impact. We sponsored 2 studies about AI and emerging technologies to get a pulse on what business and IT and data decision makers are saying about them. In the first study, respondents were asked what emerging technologies they expected to have the most impact over the next few years. And circling at the top, with no statistically significant difference, are generative AI, AI-driven automation, and Internet of Things. These all represent new frontiers in AI that are fundamentally changing the way organizations should protect, manage, and optimize their physical and digital assets. In a second study, specifically with IT and data decision makers, we heard that 93% are already using generative AI in some capacity. Tom, you and I have spent a lot of time discussing the impact of these emerging technologies over the next several years and what it means to the information lifecycle. So could you take us through that information?
Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate you having me on the call today. So I think what Deborah's provided so far is examples of the kinds of content and the many ways artificial intelligence is going to impact our future. Speaking a little bit more to this slide, one point is certainly that if you look at the references here, the experts tend to agree that there's a massive change coming and that all of us are going to be affected by that change. More specifically, one of the things that Deborah has pointed out is this relationship and the importance between the difference between structured and unstructured content. When it comes to some of these specific technologies that are being called out on this slide, I want to point out that, for instance, generative AI, its relationship to unstructured content is pretty extreme. We're using, to build these large language models, we use large corpuses of unstructured content that we have in our organizations today to tune a specific large language model that then can automate responses and do things specific to our organization to help us create efficiencies in our businesses. The Internet of Things is very similar, right? In many cases, we think about just kind of sensor data, but the Internet of Things today is also all these cameras and image sensing things. You can go no further than your front door and think about how your Ring doorbell can recognize the difference between a stranger or somebody that it knows, and as a result, it might give you a different alert. That's the automation piece. So there's a huge dependence on unstructured content that is then driving that automation. The 3 things that are listed on this slide as big game changers that are going to affect all of us. As organizations, we can build consensus and communicate about these topics because they're broad and not all of us wants to know all the details about large language models and all that stuff. It's too much. But what we do need is some basic frameworks to have a conversation. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the lifecycle models of the past that we've used to describe information and content management. And typically they, revolve around create, store, manage, share, collaborate, and then dispose or archive. Those are some of the typical items. There's many of them. What we've done here is tried to reflect what we think is important to understand a much more modern way of thinking about information lifecycle that is more true to a digital world than the lifecycle models of the previous day. So here we're going to just concentrate on 4 pieces: capture and enrich. So today, as there's a couple of important things to recognize about this capture and enrich process. One is that we can capture any type of asset. We're not just talking about paper anymore here. When we talk about content information, we're talking about all assets in an organization, because we want to create data and we want to understand trends to make better decisions into the future, whether that's a piece of equipment or it's capturing content that exists in our archives. The enrich piece is much different today. And a point to really take away here is that this is the first time we're employing AI to change what we're doing from the past. So if we're thinking about paper and documents, we're talking about intelligent document processing, natural language processing, these different AI models and tools that we're using to enrich content and create more metadata about the information we're capturing. So that's step 1. Step 2 here in this model is the structure and operationalize. And this is taking that content that we're now capturing and enriching and putting it somewhere where we can use it easily, where it's accessible to everyone in the organization. And up until now, we've been putting a lot of that information in lots of disparate silos, which make it difficult for people to get at. And then you have to work across APIs and it becomes very difficult. I'm sure everyone on this call is very familiar with this problem. But when we use an enterprise data platform or a content services platform to really take information from multiple sources, get it in one place and make it accessible, now you've structured and operationalized that content. And this isn't a nice to have today. This is a must have if you're going to move ahead and compete in a digital world. Then the next piece of this is the connect and activate. And once you have things in a singular place and you can go look at that data and look at data from multiple sources in one spot, now you can start to see patterns and trends. And it's those patterns and trends that in essence give you additional metadata. So you're sort of applying AI now for the second time and really enriching your content. So this is kind of the difference between the old linear model. This is a much more recursive model, and we really need to be aware of that as we think about how we're using our information. And the nice thing about this now is that when you get that insight or that knowledge that you create from applying AI in that third stage here, you get to keep that information. That's the knowledge. That's the telemetry that helps you make better decisions within your business. But while you keep that, you can sanitize it. You can get rid of the PII and anything that's privacy related, and you can then follow your retention rules and get rid of the content that is creating risk in the business. And with that, I think I'd like to transition over to Rob, who's going to talk much more in depth about more of the security and governance side of this conversation.
Thanks very much, Tom. What we want to talk about here, from a life cycle point of view, we need to start thinking about a new orientation towards that information. But first of all, if we think about the challenges that organizations face, we did a research study for this in earlier this year to start identifying the emerging technology challenges. And what you see on this screen here are the top 10 of them. And if I look at this through that lens of governance, first of all, none of these are surprising. These are the same story points that we often see when we talk about information governance or records and information management across the board. A few of the real key ones here, whether we start thinking about that privacy side of the house, whether we start thinking about the resources or even just the technology itself, how do we actually start transforming that content? As Deborah and Tom alluded to, the fact that so much of potential value information exists in unstructured environments, whether that is physical documents or other digital formats that are difficult to access and difficult to extract value from. These are the challenges that our world now faces. But if we really zero in on two key ones here, the regulatory compliance and legal implications. We know that the world of AI is becoming much more regulated itself. In 2022 alone, 37 AI-related bills were passed into law across the globe. When you think about the fact that there were 0 globally oriented AI-related laws in 2016, that ramp up to today has been extremely accelerated, extremely focused on getting the right controls in place. The second piece of the puzzle is about that valuable information and data locked in physical formats, as we talked about earlier. This really is a form of dark data, and we've always talked about dark data being there. And how do we extract the value from information that is relatively inaccessible, or the data cannot be accessed consistently? That opportunity, that challenge is really where we should be thinking about that. And how do we actually tap into those challenge sets? One of the ways that we often start thinking about this is through that lens of risk and risk management itself. The classic world has risk management teams and risk managers themselves. We look at these 4 quadrants across the board: technology risk, legal risk, operational risk, financial risk. All of those pieces come into play here as well when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, whether it's under the operational risk category of biases and motives of the provider, to the financial risk of data reporting accuracy. How do we make sure that those pieces are approached properly and consistently? As I said on the last slide, with the emerging growth of regulation, we're starting to see some adopted frameworks coming into play as well. In the US, the National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST, has established the Trustworthy and Responsible AI Resource Center earlier this year. Part of the goal of that is to support the implementation and the international alignment of the US-based AI risk management framework to push that forward. We also see on the other side of the world, Australia with their AI ethics principles, seeking to create that same framework model. Around the globe, whether it's the US, whether it's Australia, China, Europe, even in the supranational entities like the World Economic Forum, the EU, etc., everybody is thinking about how do we put in place the right governance controls to help that orientation of risk and that mitigation of risk across the board. This is where we really have an opportunity when we think about tying these threads together. Whether we start from that information governance perspective, which gives us the framework of governance, the framework of opportunity, or we start with those use cases around AI. How do we actually tap into that and define how can we get the most value out of content? As Tom alluded earlier, those large language models, those chatbots, those assistive technologies that are going to help organizations and individuals work through everything from an ESG-related challenge to a business-related challenge to help them frame out those use cases. we can tie all of this together into what we frame as being a unified asset strategy to really help an organization think about how do we tie together the physical, the digital, with AI to get a consistent and uniform perspective around operationally extracting value from that information. And wouldn't it be nice if we could consistently derive that economic value from our approaches? By having that unified asset strategy, an organization can really think about tying these pieces together, having an effective framework and governance control around AI to define and execute upon those use cases, and tying into the more broad governance, risk, and compliance initiatives that the organization faces as part of an information governance activity. Let's hand this back to Tom and talk a little more about those use cases.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. And I just want to take us back to the idea that we need to think about an information lifecycle that helps us embrace this new reality. And what Rob just talked about, this holistic way of thinking, it's all of our assets that we need to be thinking about. And the world we know today is moving much more quickly because of these digital workflows. And if we don't have sort of an agile framework to think about how to manage our content and our information, then we're going to struggle if we keep thinking through it in an old linear paradigm. So this model here is what we would encourage you to think about from a life cycle standpoint as you consider all assets, not just the traditional record type assets that you may have thought about in the past when it comes to content and information management. But all information is valuable. And we hope that this framework allows you to open up your thinking about that a little bit more, that the unified asset strategy helps really emphasize our need to think about all of our assets at once, and that this type of a framework can help move your organization forward in that type of thinking. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Deborah and see what she has to add.
Thanks, Tom. I wanted to talk just a moment longer about unified asset strategy and what we discovered when we did research about it. When we asked an independent research firm to conduct some in-depth interviews with business and IT leaders about their reactions to this holistic approach, we captured the quotes that you can see here. Quotes about, we believe it can improve our efficiency. It gets the creative juices flowing in my head. It could remove barriers. It's really a state-of-the-art proposal. So we did broader studies to have a look at what leaders thought about it. And we learned that 96% agree that a unified asset strategy is critical to the success of generative AI. The study was specific to generative AI. And almost 50% expect to implement a unified asset strategy in the next 1 to 3 years. Rob, a lot of organizations are already implementing parts of the approach that Tom just took us through, but they need help from moving where they are today to embrace more of that approach. How can information governance strategy help across that life cycle?
You know, Deborah, it is an important piece. We see a lot of organizations trying to do as much of this in-house as possible, thinking that it is really just a natural evolution of current practices. The chief data officer, the chief information officer, the chief risk officer's activities to sort of build that forward. But in fact, in the same way as we've seen with the evolution of information governance into an established discipline, we really see that on the AI side of the house and the unified asset strategy side of the house, there is a great opportunity and need within organizations to step back and tap into the broader community of expertise for this. This is really where an effective consulting model can come into play for organizations to help them think through those challenges of the strategy, to be able to bring forward the conversations that other organizations are having and applying them to your challenges directly, to help you understand how do you actually prioritize activities like enriching the digital assets and doing that transition from physical to digital, whether it's from a perspective of protecting and optimizing the value or ensuring compliance across the board. All of these pieces can have a conversation and have a strategic element. What we have often found is that organizations that tap into that consulting expertise get a much richer perspective into the conversation. They're able to actually understand the activities within the industry better. They're able to have a perspective on what are the right and most successful journey activities across organizations. So for us, it really helps to understand the broader piece of the equation. And from a consulting set of house, to bring that broader piece of the equation into your strategy to help you influence and understand the evolution of that.
Hey, Tom and Rob, I want to thank you so much for bringing a level of depth and breadth to this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I just want to wrap by mentioning that having a unified asset strategy helps organizations accelerate AI-driven innovation while lowering risk. It's a coordinated approach that involves technology, process engineering, a culture that embraces continuous improvement and innovation. There are three ways that I talk about what unified asset strategy can do, and we touched on all of those today. As Tom described, it can help you evolve your asset lifecycle approach from capture or creation of data or ingestion of an asset all the way through to responsible retirement of that asset. It can, as Rob talked about, help you optimize asset protection and management at scale, a highly agile approach. And ultimately, it can help you catalyze value creation because you've laid down strategic and agile strategies to do just that. We'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And I know that the team has more information about the changes resulting from advances in AI and how a unified asset strategy can help. Thank you all for listening.